There's a tremendous post on the Gray Zone Project that talks about the origins of Juan Guaido, the now seemingly the president of Venezuela all of a sudden. Now, they dug really far into his past. I mean, they went full investigative journalism and did an absolutely great job. Now, I just want to give you some of the details that you'll find in that post because I think that they are extremely important. By no means is my video covering everything that's there, but it's covering, I think, some of the most important points, so I highly suggest that you go to the post itself and get all of the information. Now, before January 22nd, nobody had heard of this guy, Juan Guaido. Now, only a few months ago, he's a 35-year-old character who was completely obscure in Venezuelan politics, like a complete unknown, but he was part of a politically marginal far-right fringe group that was closely associated with some of the terrible acts of violence that have been carried out against the public in Venezuela. In other words, he, strictly speaking, is a terrorist for the most part, given the actions that his group, that he's associated with, and have probably, allegedly, taken part of himself. Okay, the guy's a terrorist, in my opinion. Okay, but after a single phone call came from U.S. Vice President Mike Pence, all of a sudden, he's declaring himself the president of the country. And this is a guy where almost nobody knew who he was until he had declared himself to be the vice president. Echoing the Washington consensus, the New York Times editorial board hailed Guaido as a credible rival to Maduro with a refreshing style and vision of taking the country forward. The Bloomberg News editorial board applauded him for seeking the restoration of democracy, and the Wall Street Journal declared him a new democratic leader. Now, meanwhile, in Canada, numerous European nations and Israel and the bloc of the right-wing Latin American governments known as the Lima Group recognize Guaido as the legitimate leader of Venezuela. Of course, calling someone who literally just declares themselves the president without even having run in an election democratic is pretty hilarious, to be perfectly honest. And when you've got great bastions of democracy like the United States and Israel on your side, then you know you're doing something right. Marco Tarugi, an Argentinian journalist and the leading chronicler of Venezuelan politics, did speak directly to the Gray Zone and said this: Guaido is more popular outside Venezuela than inside, especially in the elite Ivy League and Washington circles. He's a known character there, is predictably right-wing, and is considered loyal to the program. Now, when Washington eventually found this guy, they decided to start making him, and I'm referring to Guaido, as the face of the opposition in Venezuela. You could not get a better example of someone who was handpicked by the elite establishment. Now, he spent most of his political career in a far-right violent faction, which is about par for the course for the United States when choosing foreign leaders. Now, all of a sudden, he's been moved to the forefront in one of the most agonizingly destabilizing campaigns of Venezuela, which have occurred one after another. Now, according to polls in the country about who the public actually supports, only 20% of the population actually supports this guy. Yet you wouldn't know that from the Western news coverage, who frequently takes videos of pro-Maduro rallies and tries to pass them off as anti-Maduro rallies. Now, you see, I don't speak Spanish, but when somebody has a sign that says Viva Chavismo, I'm pretty sure he's not calling for the right-wing opposition. You see, now I can read, I understand what Viva means, I understand what Maduro and Chavismo means. So, to the mainstream media in the United States and possibly other imperialist powers too, if you're going to lie and say that a protest is anti-Maduro, you might want to maybe Photoshop out some of those pro-Maduro signs, because it kind of just makes you look stupid or lazy that you couldn't be bothered to get that right. I mean, I'm sure there's a large percentage of the American population who speaks fluent Spanish and would know that you're lying. Now, the Venezuelan government has suffered from assassination attempt after assassination attempt. By no means the 600 that were attempted by Fidel Castro, who seemingly, in terms of unnatural causes of death, is practically immortal. Okay, So we have the U.S. involved in a plot codenamed Operation Constitution to capture Maduro at the Miraflores Palace, another called Operation Armageddon to assassinate him at a military parade in July 2017. And just over a year later, the exiled opposition leaders tried and failed to kill Maduro using the drone bombs at a military parade in Caracas. So this is not just a destabilization campaign that has been going on for about 20 years to try to destroy the country and manufacturing political dissent, but outright attempted assassination. And we know this is the United States behind this. The world knows that the United States is behind this. Even the places that completely pretend that the U.S. isn't carrying out imperialism know that the U.S. is trying to have him assassinated. Now, on October 5th, with Chavez's popularity, this was the height. On October 5th of 2005, Chavez's popularity at his height. 5 Venezuelan student leaders now ended up in Belgrade, Serbia, to begin training to carry out an insurrection against the Bolivarian government. And we found this out courtesy of the Center for Applied Nonviolent Action Strategies, or CANVAS, ironically hiring people who have a violent political history while claiming to be a nonviolent organization. Now, the group is funded largely through the National Endowment for Democracy, possibly the most notorious group used for destabilizing not just democracies inside of Latin America, but across the world as well. And they have their entire history functioned as an arm of the CIA, who coincidentally, of course, carries out most of their actual funding. And their job, of course, is always carrying out regime change. In 2007, when Guaido graduated from Andes Bello Catholic University in Caracas, he moved to Washington, D.C. to enroll in the Governance and Political Management program at George Washington University under then tutelage of Venezuelan economist Luis Enrico Berrizbiritia, and one of the top Latin American neoliberal economists. Berrizbiritia is a former executive director of the International Monetary Fund who spent more than a decade in Venezuelan energy sector under the oligarchic old regime that was eventually defeated by Hugo Chavez. In other words, he was literally trained by the dictatorship that existed before Chavez eventually came to power and abolished them. Hey, that's pretty obvious that that's how that was going to go, that he was going to end up being recruited by them to be the one to carry this out. I mean, the opposition in Venezuela is in an absolute mess. Half of them are boycotting the elections, half of them are insisting that they go through. The U.S. calls for people to boycott the election and then turns around and claims the elections are invalid because some people were boycotting them, the very boycott that they themselves called for. Okay. I call for the people in the United States to boycott their election, and no matter who wins, I declare the election to be invalid because reasons. Now, the intelligence company Stratfor and Canvas, the trainers of this cell, identified Guaido's ally, a street organizer named Juan Guaido, a key factor in determining the constitutional reform. Following year, the Guaido was rewarded for his efforts inside of Venezuela with the Cato Institute's Milton Friedman Prize for Advancing Liberty. Think about that. Milton Friedman, liberty. Pick one. And, I mean, the Cato Institute. I mean, that pretty much just says it all right there. Now, he also got a $500,000 prize for doing it, which he then turned around and invested in building his own Liberty First, Primero Justica political network. So, this is just a sample of where this Guaido character came from. I mean, this is the whole story of his networks to right-wing apparatuses inside the United States, his alliances to regime change elements in the United States, is long documented inside the full actual post that you will find on Gray Zone. But just take this as a mere sample of what a pure and unadulterated puppet of U.S. imperialism that Guaido actually is. So for you got all these right-wingers running around claiming, oh, Venezuela is so bad, Venezuela economic crisis, they literally just deny that economic sanctions against the country designed to try to destroy it were ever carried out by the United States. They just pretend it doesn't exist. That's like continually robbing someone every time they get out of their house and then claim that they're poor and attack them for making poor life choices. It's stupidity beyond all reason. It's either absolute stupidity on the part of these right-wingers, or it's the absolute lowest depths of dishonesty. This could not be any more obvious a plot by U.S. imperialism to overthrow the Maduro government, or more specifically, given Hugo Chavez as well, the Bolivarian Revolution. And this speaks volumes, unending volumes, to not only the outright evil that is the United States government and its foreign policy, but the stupidity and even the sheep mentality, or even, given some of them, the outright evil of those who support it. Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.